quorum yet. So even though I agree with Jenna that we have a full agenda, we should start. I think we need to wait for a few more people. Not that the most important people aren't already here, but we'll give it 2 more minutes. So with 14 people, ideally we'd have at least 8. I did not hear from anyone that they couldn't come. So.
Cindy, we lost your video.
You did?
Yeah.
I can see myself. You can't see me?
I can still see Cindy.
Oh, weird. I can't. That's okay. I know what you look like, Cindy.
Oh, yeah. Poor network quality. Close other. All right. It says to close everything. I don't know why I'm having network quality issues. I hope they don't last. Okay, so now we have 15 people, even though I can't see them. So I should be able to turn the page and see who everybody else is. But anyway, welcome everyone. In that case, then we're going to go, I can see in the participant list. Oh yeah, we have a great group. So welcome everybody. Can you hear me? I keep getting these messages saying I have poor network quality, which is driving fear into my heart. All right. Let's go around and introduce ourselves. I'm Cindy. So welcome to the C2E2 meeting for January. This is an open public meeting. It's being recorded. We're happy to have you. Members of the public are welcome to make comment, but other than introductions after that, only members of the commission and other staff will be speaking and our guest speakers. So I'm Cindy Lewin. I'm the chair of C2E2. Jenna, I see you next.
I'll come on video for this. Hi, everyone. Jenna Peabody, member of the air team in OSUM.
Okay, and Alex?
Hey, everyone. Alex Rowe with C2E2.
I see Doug.
I'm Doug Snowenboss, temporary interim acting deputy vice chair for C2E2.
Couldn't be more enthusiastic about his embracing of the role. Elizabeth.
Elizabeth Whitney, Commissioner and Chair of the Energy Committee.
Let's see, Joan. Joan?
Yeah, Joan McIntyre, Commissioner.
Kevin? Okay, Kevin is the commissioner who's probably on mute. Mark?
Mark Greenwood, Commissioner.
Great. Melissa?
Hi, Melissa Ben, Commissioner.
Michaela?
Michaela Milton, Commissioner. It's kind of dark in here.
Trevor? It is dark in there. That's very sustainable of you to not use light. Yes.
Trevor Montano, Commissioner.
Right. And now I'm going to go back and pick up guests and staff and speakers. So I see Henry Perillo.
Henry Perillo, Arlington resident. I'm off camera because I've just moved and my house is a mess.
Yeah, that's great. Jason Papakosma.
Hi there, Jason Papakosma, acting head of the Office of Sustainability and Environmental Management. Good to see you all.
Great. And a speaker shortly, Jennifer Fioretti.
Hello, Jennifer Fioretti, Assistant County Manager for Climate Policy.
John Bloom.
Hi, John Bloom, Sierra Club, just not a commissioner, just member of the public, and love to watch these fascinating commission meetings.
Yeah, former commissioner, former chair of C2E2, but yes, just a member of the public. Liliana.
Hi, good evening. My name is Liliana. Thank you, Cindy. I am an Arlington resident, and I'm hoping to be able to join the commission.
Welcome. And Lisa?
Hi, Lisa Marcellus, future commissioner. I believe my official appointment is tomorrow, but happy to be here.
Yes, and we'll welcome you and introduce you. Well, yeah, we'll come back to you. R.D. Silber?
Apologies, my name
isn't adjustable, but I'm Ryan Silber with ICLEI Local Governments for
Oh, you're our
Sustainability USA.
our first speaker. Great, welcome. And I only see two more, Rich Dooley.
Hi, everybody. Rich Dooley, Arlington County Director of Climate Policy. Thanks.
And Stephen Rook.
Hey there, Stephen Rauch, relatively new Arlington resident as of last April. Just interested in getting more involved and interested in food policy work as it relates to climate and energy.
Great. Did I miss anybody, or did anybody call in after I got through this list?
Wait, Rob Sandoli.
Yeah, this is.
Oh, hi, Rob.
Hey, sorry, I went to courthouse because I can't follow instructions, so joined late.
Oh. Oh, well, it looks like Rich is at courthouse, or is that just a fake background, Rich? Fake background, sorry. All right, sorry, Rob. Maybe there's a nice coffee
and,
shop nearby.
This is Jonathan Morgenstein. I also can't follow directions. I also went to courthouse, so I'm driving home right now, and I'll be on computer soon.
All right, well, welcome, everybody. Thank you for that. I did want to, so a couple of quick things. First of all, despite the fact we just spent time on introductions, we do have an incredibly filled agenda with not one, but two guest speakers and also late breaking issues. So as you ask questions, please be mindful of that. And I also want to say that Majdi Shamali has had to resign after a number of years on the commission for personal reasons. And so we thank him for his work. He's not here tonight. And I also want to mention this is Michaela Milton's last meeting. Her term is going to be up before our next meeting. So Michaela, who's been wonderful, Michaela, who's done all our interviewing. So many of the people on the commission Michaela did the interviews to get you on here. And Michaela is also our forestry and PFAS expert and many other things. So Michaela, thank you so much for all you've done. And I don't know if you want to
Yes,
say.
I'm excited. We've got lots of good candidates, that I've spoken with, and you have too, and that will be joining the commission soon.
So, well, thank you. I'm going to start a round of applause for Michaela. So thank you very much, Michaela. I know everybody's on mute. When everybody's on mute, these rounds of applause are a little bit lacking, but just 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So, and then as Lisa mentioned, we want to welcome Lisa. Michaela's interviewed her, I've interviewed her, and Lisa, who I'm not going to call her the mini Michaela, but she has a lot of forestry. Michaela's like, I can resign. I found Lisa. She has forestry. She has PFAS. She has everything. I'm like, well, Michaela, it's not exact. It doesn't work like that, but we welcome Lisa, and we're very glad to have the expertise that you will be bringing and look forward. So if you want to say a few words to introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Michaela. Again, my name is Lisa Marcellus. I have lived in Arlington since 2021. I currently work at IBM as a federal consultant. My client for the past few years has been the U.S. Air Force Civil Engineers, and I'm currently an environmental analyst for them. But I've previously been on the Environmental Advisory Board of my hometown. I worked for New York State Parks for several years, mainly focusing on natural resources and invasive species management, but was really looking forward to getting more involved in the Arlington community and very excited to meet you all. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lisa. So with that, Ryan, we're delighted to have you, and many thanks to Trevor for arranging to have you as a guest speaker tonight. And Trevor, would you like to do an introduction?
Sure, Cindy, I'm happy to. And Ryan Silber, thank you for joining us. Ryan comes to us from the Local Governments for Sustainability Network, who has partnered with the Coalition for Green Capital on the deployment of $5 billion of EPA grant funds that will be deployed across the country, and specifically within the CGC's mandate and their design of their grant program deployment. There is a pocket of funds that have been allocated to partner with municipalities across the country through what's called the Municipal Investment Fund. And so I believe Ryan is helping CGC coordinate and run that RFP process. And so we've asked Ryan to join us today and speak for about 15 minutes on what the program is, what it means for for green capital deployment, what it may mean for Arlington, and then hopefully leave about 10 minutes or so for questions from the group. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan. Ryan?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Trevor. So as he mentioned, Ryan Silver with ICLEI USA, Local Governments for Sustainability, to talk to you today about our upcoming or ongoing funding opportunity. I'm going to screen share a brief PowerPoint presentation, try to keep things quick here, be respectful of your time. Can I get a thumbs up or a verbal affirmation from someone that we, yep,
Yes.
okay, great.
I can see it.
So I'll just start with a brief introduction of our organization. We are a membership organization started about 30 plus years ago, born out of the UN subnational climate agreements. So we support hundreds of local communities across the United States, counties and local governments and tribal communities with climate action planning, greenhouse gas inventorying, and a variety of other free services and fee-for-service opportunities. So I didn't have an opportunity to check if Arlington County is actually indeed an ICLEI USA member. I'm relatively new to the organization myself, but feel free to contact me if anyone in this community is interested in learning more about ICLEI USA's services. And then just touch quickly on our funder for the Municipal Investment Fund. That is the Coalition for Green Capital. So this is a U.S. green banking organization and consortium. They issue funds themselves, and they also represent a network of green banks across the United States. They received a $5 billion grant from the US EPA Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to implement a variety of clean energy projects. One of those opportunities I'm going to cover today. So just a little bit more about their investment focus of the Coalition for Green Capital. I'll highlight an opportunity right now, but the general theme for what we're talking about today is opportunities to implement climate action projects. And that's not just relying upon public funding, but rather what's the role of local government in attracting private capital to these projects. So what is this funding opportunity, the Municipal Investment Fund? So it is a two-phased opportunity for 104 communities across the United States. That's 2 per state. You can see on the right-hand side, there are some basic qualifications, maximum population for the local government of 750,000 and must have at least 1 low-income and disadvantaged community. But within that, we have a pretty wide goal of activities that we're seeking to fund. So this phase 1 opportunity includes a $250,000 grant to build a public-private partnership plan. More broadly speaking, it is to support policy activities, partnership building, community engagement, anything that leads more broadly and not at a project-specific level, but at a community level towards attracting private capital towards these clean energy projects. In addition to those $250,000 grants being awarded to 104 communities, we are providing general technical assistance on municipal finance and public-private partnerships, green capital, and the green capital ecosystem more broadly. There's a lot of opportunity to be introduced to this network of funders that CGC coordinates and the private investment community at large for different projects that might be in your project pipeline, thinking like a capital improvement plan or any other sort of infrastructure planning documents or private developments that the city or county is working with. So here's a timeline. We are in the midst of our call for proposals, and you'll see February 5th is our application due date. Just to make you all aware, we are looking at a potential extension. I don't want to get any hopes up, but since that's currently in the works, I'm speaking to you now. Just wanted to flag that for your awareness. The timeline would be awards would be selected in March. And you can think about if there is an extension moving that along 1 month. The rest of this timeline is static. So June 2025 would be the start of phase 2 of this program. So among the 104 awarded communities, there's an opportunity for 10 of those communities to secure an additional $2 million for additional market building funding, but I'm sure of more interest to folks, pre-development funding. So this is project-specific implementation. Those awards would be made in around August 2025. The goal is to make recurring investments, those additional funds for market building pre-development on an annual basis, that is pending securing of additional funds. So phase one, just get a little bit more detail. We are looking for a coalition application. A local government can apply on their own, but we are heavily suggesting that they apply with a green bank and a not-for-profit partnership or a not-for-profit partner. They can be one and the same. If you don't have a green bank in your community, you can apply with another financially capable individual or entity, that is. Think about an organization that can speak to you all at a local government level about what does it mean to talk to financiers? How can you make your public projects more appealing to a private entity? And when we talk about public-private partnerships, we speak about anything from a range of hand-holding through a permitting process, looking at streamlined regulation, helping with site assessments or site selection, to something more involved like co-management of an infrastructure project or a revenue stream from that project towards the investment or private developer, the investors, the private developers. The application, it's fairly brief. It should just take a few hours to fill out. There's a 1,000-word narrative, but then the rest of the application is more run-of-the-mill. You might be asking, what are the types of projects we're looking for? And oh, sorry, I'm actually going backwards here. Apologies there. Well, sorry for skipping around. I'm going to list those project types off verbally. So the main category of projects are distributed energy generation and transmission facilities and storage. So somewhere under 10,000 megawatts of generation is typical, but it can go in excess of that. The distribution technology as well as storage, and then zero emissions transportation infrastructure or fleets, and then net zero buildings. So here's a little bit of what we're looking for. Again, the key is local governments taking activities that bring them a little bit closer to attracting private capital to projects, or partnering with developers or institutional investors to fund these types of qualified projects I just listed out. There's a lot more information on our webpage. As I mentioned, our deadline's quickly approaching, so initial first steps would be connecting with application partners, identifying what sorts of projects you all might have in your community or within your own public institutions that could be eligible in the future for pre-development funding. Or generally, as I mentioned, phase one is not focused project specific, but what sort of activities could you all take to instigate more private clean energy project development within your community? Our webpage has an FAQ document, application form, the RFP itself. We host office hours twice a week. We have some webinar recordings located online as well. There's a QR code there, but if you just search Google for ICLEI USA MIF, you should you should find that pretty quickly as well. I covered phase two here as well. That's the pre-development funding. I wanted to just touch on one more opportunity. So if you all find that you're not ready for an application, but you are still working with private developers in your community or institutional investors on funding these clean energy projects, the Coalition for Green Capital has an ongoing solicitation process to connect projects and developers and local governments directly with institutional investors and provide more of a specialized financial tools to help fund these projects. So this is a project or 4 projects that are ready to secure their final bits of financing or are ready in general to secure financing. They can partner with the Coalition for Green Capital to be connected to a network of funders, and then also see what other opportunities there are for specialized financial products to just bring down the total cost of financing the project. One more thing I just wanted to highlight, just making sure folks understand this is not just for projects that are built and owned by the local government, but also there's an opportunity for privately owned projects here, as long as, again, the local government plays some sort of role in helping that project be realized. Just Coalition for Green Capital's website. I would advise you to go to ICLEI USA's website. Just you'll find a bit more project specific information. But if you're looking for information on RFP1, definitely check out Coalition for Green Capital's website. So that's everything I had to share as far as a presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions folks might have on the process or just generally connecting your clean energy projects with private capital.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan. That was very interesting. Not to put anybody on the spot, but I'd like to hear from the county staff whether, so that second category of if we're not ready to do that first thing that we could apply generally for connecting to other kinds of investors, I'm sure that will be of interest. I'm not sure if we've looked at this application process for now and how we think whether we qualify with the disadvantaged communities. And so I don't know if anyone would like to speak on that from the county.
Cindy, you broke up a little on me. Were you talking about the primary RFP or the ongoing?
The primary RFP.
Okay. Yeah, I think no, and this was helpful just to get a little more background and the bigger picture and learn a little bit more about it. Yeah, I think our feeling on that primary RFP is sort of not this time, not right now, in terms of the other priorities that we're really focused on. I think particularly as I learned tonight about some of the other pieces, the community partner prerequisite, for example, I think that just adds some complexity. I mean, I understand the why of it, but I think that reinforces kind of the upfront complexity we'd face in trying to put our time into getting that all together in such a short time frame.
Yeah, I mean, this is Trevor. Maybe I can just comment here. I mean, look, as many of you know, I run a firm that focuses on providing this type of financing. We know most of the players in the market. And I think we could move pretty quickly, Jason, if the county decided that this was something that it should explore. And in my humble opinion, we should. I mean, this is a historic moment of a $27 billion grant program being run by the EPA that is exceptionally helpful to those jurisdictions that don't have a green bank, of which the Commonwealth is one. And so I would argue that some of our neighboring jurisdictions, including Montgomery County and DC, are a fair bit ahead of us in terms of developing a public-private kind of partnership funding ecosystem. Now they have green banks, and so that certainly helps. But these type of opportunities don't come around too often, and so I guess my own humble opinion I would highly encourage the county to look very closely at this opportunity set.
You can correct me where I'm wrong. This is Jenna with the county. So it sounds like the CGC, is circumventing the Green Bank network by announcing their Clean Communities program. So we wanted to run the RFP process and then allocate the grant dollars to allow progressive mid-sized geographies, and that would accelerate the transition to net zero. And then, so Trevor, we are acknowledging, considering, this would help Arlington. Maybe they are well positioned, but I'm not sure if the challenges were considered. So I think that the CGC required projects to have 50% LIDAC communities. They're loans, they're not grant money, and we weren't sure what the cost of the capital is. So when we were sort of, we're leaning into it and we're trying to be aggressive with potential projects in the future. So if, for example, our affordable housing already has a group of projects over the next 3 years, which of Arlington, we could put 2% into them. Could the CGC slot a percentage into these projects? And then, we could call CGC and, discuss further. But we already have an affordable housing framework, and it would take another X amount of years to set up a new admin process to set this up in addition to juggling our current pipeline of projects.
Yeah,
I just want to.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, Trevor. I was just going to clarify about the CGC requirements. So CGC's investment portfolio is required to make across the board, on average, 50% investment in low-income and disadvantaged communities, but that is not project specific as far as I'm aware. And then for this opportunity with the Municipal Investment Fund, it is entirely grant funding. So CGC in their other investments are going to take a blended finance approach. use a majority of loan funding and then other specialized tools to help just bring down the total cost of capital. But the pre-development and the market building grants are just grants.
I see a couple questions, and we're not going to be able to spend too much time on this, although it is worthy of a lot of discussion. Jonathan, and then Melissa.
Yeah, but sorry, my understanding was the commitment from the NCIF winners was that well over 50, 60%, 70% of the funds would be used exclusively in low-income and disadvantaged communities. And so I'd be, and you know, I could be wrong on that, but I mean, it's I mean, the intent is really to focus on communities and individual households that do not have the means to otherwise. Sorry, I work for National Renewable Energy Lab, and I work on this. So I mean, you know your program better than I do, but my understanding was that like it's not just okay. Well, you know, half the money can go to my
So Ryan,
the NCIF mandate is 40%.
No, that was the mandate for the application, but the commitment from the NCIF winners to the EPA was much greater than that, actually.
Well, maybe Ryan can answer for CGC.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can speak specifically to this program in which there's a 50% target across the board on investments. We are asking for qualifications of having at least one LIDAC community within the communities that we are funding. But I can't speak at large to CGC's total portfolio of investments.
Right. All right, Melissa.
Yeah, thank you. This is a great presentation. I was curious if with our new administration in the last week, if are there any concerns about whether GGRF is going to get amended or modified, if you can speak to that.
So, I mean, we're obviously in a very uncertain period as far as federal administrative requirements. I can tell you that we have already received our funds. You know, they're outside of the federal government, and we are already in contract with the federal government. So, you know, outside of, you know, voiding regular contract law, we don't anticipate major changes to our administrative procedures.
Well, here's hoping. Well, Ryan, I think this is worthy of a lot of discussion and exploration, but not on this call tonight. And I'm hoping that we can follow up with you, with Trevor, Jason, Jenna. But thank you very much. I thought you really made very clear what you're looking for and what the availability is, and also knowing that there are these other categories available after this first one, I think is very, very helpful. So any last questions? I'm just going to sold. Thank you. I'm sorry that we're in such a rush, but I really appreciate that presentation, and thank you for being here. And you're welcome to stay, although I can't imagine why you would, but you are welcome to stay.
Well, feel free to reach out with other questions. You can contact me directly, or I'm sure Trevor can put us in touch.
Yes, definitely.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yes, thank
Thanks,
you. So with that, our next guest speaker, who is more of a part of the family at this point, is Jason Papakosma. And when our meeting last month, you may recall, was his first day in his position as acting all of the things he is acting of in addition to his day job. But now that you have a whole month under your belt, we'd love to hear how the transition is going for AIR, what you've chosen, you know, what's emerging as priorities as you work with the team. So Jason, over to you.
All right, you guys hear me okay? Super. All right, thanks, Cindy. Yeah, I was looking at the calendar, and technically it's been 3 full weeks. But since the new year started, I'll put it that way. I'm starting the clock then. But it's been very busy, 3 weeks for sure. And as Cindy mentioned, I'm continuing to get my feet under me as in my acting role, and that's for both the stormwater program and the air programs together. So that's pretty broad umbrella. I'm definitely enjoying the challenge and the learning, even if I guess for those of you who might be Harry Potter fans, I could use Hermione's time turner some days to fit it all in. Although someone reminded me you really would not want one of those. That would just cause all kinds of problems. But anyway, it does feel like that some days. And I know last month Eileen gave an update on the stormwater program, kind of the major initiatives we're working on. So I will not get into that again tonight because we've covered that, and I think it was pretty comprehensive. On the air side of the house, I'll say a couple of things up front in terms of where I've been spending my time in more or less in this order, but I'll go through it. It's certainly getting to know the team and their work, getting up to speed on the programs as well. Certainly focusing on where I can help facilitate moving work forward. I think in roles like mine, that's a big part of the work is just connecting the dots and making sure, we have what we need. And right now we've been working with our DES leadership to keep the highest priority work moving forward. And then, in my case, but specifically making sure we have the capacity to do the work in front of us. It kind of relates to our previous conversation too, like really making sure we have the capacity to do the work that's right in front of us with the people that we've got. And then another big priority is building and improving and enhancing the communication with the Climate Policy Office and Jen and Rich. So that's a big also area of focus right now as we look to, I'll say some more things about that as well. So what this looks like in practice for me is spending a lot of time in both, one-on-one and group conversations, meeting with the air team every week, meeting with Steve Burr individually. Steve is the air program manager. Jen and I meet both formally and informally pretty regularly. And the four of us, Steve and I and Jen and Rich, have also started regular meetings as well. So really leaning in on communication and collaboration as we kind of get our feet under us. And of course, for me, it's a whole lot of listening, reading, and absorbing as well. This is an area of work that's not entirely new to me. Am I getting an echo here?
Yeah, it is. I think we should all put ourselves on mute.
Okay. All right, I'll try again. It's an area of work and subject matter. It's not entirely new to me. I mean, I worked alongside the air program as it grew up. When I first started with the county, it was me and Joan Kelsch and Jeff Harn, and the green building program didn't exist. So, I've kind of seen those programs get initiated and built and evolve over time. So, I have my exposure with the subject matter that way, among others. And speaking about the Climate Policy Office in particular, I really would know. So Jen and I have got a history of working together going back, Jen, I think it was maybe early 2010s, we put on that Green Streets Symposium. We had speakers from around the country. We were down at what was called the Artisphere. It's not called that anymore, is it? I don't think so. So we helped plan that together when Jen was back in DOT. Subsequent to that, when Jen was in Parks, we worked on tree conservation, initiatives and legislation, proposed legislation. So, and now, here we are working together again. So, I think I really value the relationship. We've worked a lot with each other and have a lot of, trust. So I think that's going to be really helpful as we chart this course together. I feel like, to me, there's really no shortage of climate action work to do, both within the air team, but us obviously beyond it. And we really have to use everything we've got and use it well. So I think our goal is really to multiply each other. What we're doing in air and what CPO is doing is to multiply each other. So right now we're figuring out how we do that. How do we best do that? So we're at the start of that. As I said, it's been 3 weeks. We've had a lot of those meetings I just mentioned in 3 weeks. So I was gonna pause there. I can give some brief updates on some program areas. My intention tonight was not to get into heavy detail on any of those, but I wanted to just pause there, Cindy, just see if there's any questions or thoughts, and then could continue.
Questions for Jason? Doug?
Yeah, Jason, I was wondering if you could give us any update on the Green Building Incentive Program and if any changes are being made, or if that's sort of on hiatus right now, or just what.
Yeah, good question, Doug, and definitely on my list to talk about. So we're in the process right now of planning what I think is being called a facilitated engagement conversation sometime in mid to late February to, among other things, I think one of the goals is to get people in the room. I think, folks from C2E2, Sierra Club, other advocates, and then the building community, and get everyone in the same room. And I think first off, to have everybody hear what everybody else is saying. I think that's one of the goals, and kind of go from there. So I don't think it's on pause. I think we're taking a beat to understand we've gotten feedback, from both C2E2 and also, for example, from NAOP, to take a closer look at some things and just see, what we can do from here to kind of move it forward. So I think that conversation is a key part of it. Like, we want to make sure that we do that. Does that help, Doug?
Yeah, Jason, I just want to real quick share with you, and I know you're relatively new to this whole thing, but some of us have been involved with this GBIP update since 2023. The point I would make to you that I've made before to anybody who's listening, having new incentives for green buildings, the environmental community is going to be all in favor of that. And so, we like that, but the main thing is getting uptake from the business community. And so the most important outreach that you could do, I think, is to and from the business community to see if they're going to have uptake on whatever program is rolled out. Because if you can have the greatest program in the world, and if the business community turns up its nose for whatever reason, then it's a failure. So I just hope that you redouble your efforts to get feedback. And it's not easy, because the business community is like, hey, that's not an ongoing project of mine. It's all speculation. Why should I waste any time analyzing whether this would work for me or not? Because it's all in the future. But if you can get some input from the business community, I think that'd be really great, and greatly increase the chances that you'll have a successful program at the end of this. Thank you.
And before Jason, before I let you answer, I think that in these facilitated engagement conversations, rather than siloing every interest group, and I know you and I have talked about this, mixing us all so that we can hear what the developers are really saying. I don't know if the developers, well, I won't repeat what Doug said. You never really know what they're going to take up until you put it out there, but it is important to do outreach. But I think it's important for all of us to hear each other. It's so easy to silo everybody.
No, understood. We fully agree in terms of how we're trying to plan this. And Doug, one of my immediate action items is to reach out again to NAOP and kind of have that type of conversation and get a sense of kind of where they're at. Because as you said, if there's no uptake, it's not really incentivizing anybody.
Any other questions for Jason? I know it's still early days, but we're excited. I don't know. Yeah. You said you might want to give an update or two.
Yeah.
Building incentive is certainly one, but
yeah, definitely. No, I'm glad that Doug queued that up. I was going to mention as well. The team is in the process of putting together the report and results of the updated greenhouse gas inventory.
Oh,
so
good.
That is something I think we've tentatively penciled in to come talk to you guys in February about. Present then. Is that on your radar too, Cindy?
Yep.
Yep. Thanks, Jenna. So we briefed Greg, Emmanuel, and Mike Moon today. We've got some little more work to do and a little more internal socialization, but that's our intent, which I think is great. It's ton of work and really valuable update on kind of where we are.
Yeah, understanding where the greenhouse gas emissions are coming from drives everything we're trying to do to reduce them. So yeah, absolutely. It's great that the county's done a lot of work on the inventory.
Yep, foundational piece of the climate action plan and all that too. Yeah, I guess a couple other things. We're excited about this. We are, with a recruitment, you never say 100% till the person's on board, but we are in the final stages of recruiting for the vacant energy implementation specialist position. So that's an existing FTE that was a vacant position. You might recall, I think in the past, it was kind of focused more on the greenhouse, the Green Home Choice program. This one's going to be really focused more on grant management and that space, so we're cautiously optimistic, and hopefully we'll have some good news to announce at the next C2E2 meeting in terms of finalizing that recruitment. Yeah. And a couple other things I'll just mention. We're in process of moving the e-bike grant forward in collaboration with EcoAction. So that's another area that the team is working heavily on. And then we have a environmental justice government to government grant as well. And we're now in the process of moving forward with the important community stakeholder work. So the team had gotten some good feedback from some of the community stakeholders about how to engage in the right way with communities, that we can really reach people and move forward with the work. So that's kind of one of the key next steps, and coming up pretty soon, next month or two, that time frame.
Great. That's great. Any other questions for Jason? And Jason, are you going to stay for the rest of this meeting, or will you be stepping off?
No, I'm going to stay. Definitely going to stay.
Okay, good. So we may have other questions as things come up, but thank you. It's a model of conciseness. So moving on to number 4 on our agenda is the Melwood SPRC letter, and thank you for the comments I saw from Rob. I did that one. That was Majdi's project, but I picked it up when he had to resign. So I wrote the letter and I did the chart. And as I mentioned in the email I sent out with the agenda, I gave them all the points. I gave them an exceeds for being a fully electrified project. This is a 5-story building that the neighbors are very, 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 very upset about because it's being plunked essentially in the middle of a residential neighborhood. 5-story building, 105 units of affordable housing. But it is an all-electric project. There are things they're not doing, and I hope that there are some things that they will do. But I did give them all the points for being all-electric, even though they have a backup diesel generator. That's a question we've asked, because we see that a lot, is buildings that are electric except for that. They have been proclaiming throughout the county that they're all electric, and I've asked them to stop doing that because they're different from my last project, which truly was not served by gas lines of any kind and was truly all electric. But I still think these backup gas generators, so I'm interested in thoughts on that. But otherwise, I gave them a score of 70. They're not doing anything with their embedded carbon, reusing, recycling the materials. They're not doing as much as they could with some other, they're not doing bird-friendly glass. They're not doing dark sky lighting. They heard once I raised that at the SPRC, they got a lot of concerns that they weren't doing those things. So maybe they will. But anyway, you can see a few changes that Rob made that I'm very comfortable with. And if you scroll all the way down, I made a change since I circulated this letter. Let's see, Joan. Joan, you were ahead of me because I looked at this just an hour ago. But yeah, that looks fine. I mean, we've said it, they are seeking funding for 10%. So that's fine with me. I took out, we recommend approval of the project because I feel that from our perspective, we've given a score and that's not really up to us to recommend approval of the project. We think the affordable housing is needed. This project is going to be approved despite the neighbor. There's been a lot, and the neighbors hired an architect. I mean, they've put up the biggest fight I've ever seen a neighborhood put up. But this project is going to be approved. But I don't know that it's up to us to recommend approval. It's up to us to talk about how we feel about the sustainability features. So I took that out. And with that, I'd open it for any discussion, questions, comments.
Looks like Joan has her hand raised.
Joan.
Yeah, actually, I think the latest I saw on the Arl Now indicated that it's going to be delayed just because they're going to do a historic designation study or something like that.
Wow.
So, it is going to delay the project. Did they say anything about what the hot water heat is? Are they using electric resistance? Was there any talk about using heat pumps for hot water
They're
heat?
just, yeah, I don't know. They just said the heating is all electric. Hot water is all electric, but which kind of electric, I don't know.
Yeah,
Or
because
more accurately, I don't remember.
yeah, you kind of need to ask on that one, just because they tend to actually just go for the default, especially if they're using in-unit in-unit hot water heaters, because
Which they probably are.
yeah, the problem is that, you know, they have to actually design for the ventilation of the heat pumps, which is a little different than the resistance heat. And they're still using the kind of old designs based on resistance heat and haven't really figured out what the design should be, and nobody seems to want to do it. Yeah, and I don't, on the, you know, whether we should approve or not, the only thing is as a project that is not, say, even participating in the green building incentive policy, or at least, you know, create or develop, you know, and there's no sense that they're doing the things that, you know, we're looking for, that, you know, certainly feel comfortable saying we suggest that this not be approved, but I mean, supporting. And I think as we look in the future, I think the issue of backups is, you know, kind of encouraging more battery ready and considering battery, but that would be kind of an extra that would really kind of help with the resiliency of the building, as well as, you know, kind of move it that extra step of really being zero energy.
Right.
But,
right. So I did say that it was a fairly strong score, so indicating our support.
yeah, that's good.
We haven't usually said, but I know on the Goodwill project, we did say we recommend approval, which I know was a project that you worked on. Rob.
Yeah, hey, just a quick question on the backup. Did they give any indication why they went with diesel instead of a gas backup?
I asked that question because and I talked directly to the architect, but he was just like shrugging his shoulders. Yeah, because diesel, why not diesel? So
If it's in a residential neighborhood and they have gas lines going through there, I mean, there's you know,
I
there's
don't
other
know.
spill potentials and other, it's probably less, you know, only going to give you a certain amount of backup power, and you're going to have to refill with diesel versus if you had a gas line in there. That
Yeah, it seemed odd to me, and so that's why I asked. But
okay,
I think you raise an excellent point.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
if we're going to be delayed, we can ask more. We can ask more questions. So, in the absence of any other hands, can I make since I wrote the letter, can I make a motion to approve the letter? And looking for a second. Okay, Rob, I think I see your hand. Any other discussion? Not, then all in favor, say aye or wave.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, well, but I appreciate these notes and I can still follow up, especially if the project's being delayed. So thank you for that. Okay, so, and I do want to mention while we're talking about SPRCs that we have full attendance tonight except for Joe Trivet, and he is at his SPRC on the Hotel Pentagon, and he did ask whether he should come to this meeting or go to the SPRC meeting. It's the second meeting, the one in which they focus on sustainability, and they have so many sustainability issues. They actually asked him to lead a discussion at the SPRC about sustainability, so I told him to do that. But anyway, thank you all for being here. It's nice to have a full house. So I thought that, my original plan was that we'd segue from this discussion right into possible changes we might want to make to our SPRC checklist. But now that we have this climate change resolution that came out, everything else on the agenda is something that's very time sensitive, and that one isn't. So I thought maybe this would be a good time to pull up the climate change resolution. Uh-oh, can you hear me? Still getting these quality.
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Still getting these error messages. So if Jenna, if you could pull up the climate change resolution and we can talk about that. I think, first of all, it's very exciting that we've been hearing about this climate change resolution for a couple of months, for several months. It's very exciting that TACUS has put it together. In the note in which it was provided to me, it was provided on behalf of both TACUS and Susan Cunningham. So it's great that, and it's great that it's seeing the light of day. I talked to Susan earlier today and she encouraged us to make comments. But I think one of the comments we want to make is that we're very happy to see a climate change resolution and see the county make this such a high priority. I think I saw Melissa's note about electrification, that should be more should be specifically raised. I think, you know, something about fossil fuels not being used should be included. Joan, I think you've mentioned something about embodied carbon. And Michaela, I think you've mentioned including something more about the importance of forestry and nature and all of those things, you know, that as part of addressing climate change, the role of that, and that the Forestry Commission, to whom you are our liaison, is probably going to comment on that. We have
well, actually, Cindy, they're not able to comment given the time.
They have the same problem we do, which is that their next meeting is after the county board is supposed to consider this at its February meeting. Our next meeting is after that. Forestry's next meeting is after that. So Michaela, you're right. You're telling you point out that they're not going to be able to write a comment letter. I think,
and they've had their meeting already for January, whereas we're having ours now. So we could discuss it anyway, or at least provide comments.
Exactly.
And they didn't mention biophilia, and the county has a biophilia resolution or something.
And they don't list that in that long list. Yeah. So
no, they don't.
So we could add that.
And there's a link between stormwater credit, bioswales, and you know, we're LEED Platinum community, right? So yeah, could be a little more in that.
Yeah, Michaela, we're going to miss you. Anyway, so to Michaela's point, so we come to you today, we don't have a draft letter for the commission to approve, but I do think it's important that the commission give feedback, and Susan invited me today, you know, to be sure that to do that. So I'd like to agree on a couple of main points, and then maybe, and I want to also mention Elizabeth's letter, which I just sent around again recently. Thanks to Elizabeth, we've provided a letter about what we would like to see in this resolution shortly before it came out, which is very timely. Thank you again, Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, maybe do you have any comments that you would like to make about this? I know you've shared it with the Energy Committee.
Yeah, just recently. You know, I think this is perhaps not the document I would have written, but I'm glad that somebody wrote it and that the board is taking action on it. I think that's really the important thing here. And I think it also gives us a little bit of visibility into what the board's not only priorities are, but their understanding of climate concerns. So things that are not on their radar, you know, I've heard electrification, embodied carbon, things like that. I think there's still room for the commission to push them to incorporate those concerns. And I don't think everything needs to be in this resolution to be effective. I do have a bit of an update from our discussion on the climate action plan at the EC. We're planning on being pretty engaged in this. So I guess I would have hoped for a little bit more direction and specification on that climate action plan, but I think that we'll have other opportunities to be engaged, and I'm happy with the direction that's going. So I'm just glad that they're doing a resolution at all.
Doug, thank you, Elizabeth. Doug, do you have your hand up?
Yes, please. Thank you. 2 points. Number one, I think it's just fabulous that the board is going to do any climate action resolution whatsoever. I think we should be very reluctant to nitpick or criticize or suggest changes to the text. I think big picture, the language is not that important. It's the fact that they're actually doing this sort of a thing that's so wonderful and critical. So unless there's something in here that is just not only flat out wrong, but also big and important, I think we should just kind of leave it alone as far as the details and just applaud and celebrate and thank the board for doing this. And my second point would be, because this does talk about a climate action plan, and it's Jen's office that's going to be working on preparing that climate action plan, I would ask Jen and Jen's office whether there is anything in here that she sees as both flat out wrong and significant. And if not, then we should just be happy and clap and let this roll along.
So I see Joan, Mark, and Kevin, but before I turn to you guys, Jen, did you want to say something about that?
So thank you for the remarks thus far. I think it's, I agree. It's great to see that the board is, particularly now, setting this tone that yes, we want to move forward with a climate action plan that is comprehensive, and more importantly, Doug, to your point about what we want to see in a climate action plan, I like that they're expecting that we're going to be looking not only just about the direct benefits, but co-benefits, and also to dig into helping us to better prioritize the recommendations, right? Let's look at where we have the greatest impacts. I'm sort of remembering a conversation that I had with Elizabeth, where it's like, what are the big things that we need to move as a county in order to have great impact, and I see that coming through here. I will just say, as a planner of many years, it's nice to have a little flexibility so that as we work with this, there'll be most likely a board appointed group or manager appointed working group with stakeholders to help us to shape and mold the plan. So it is nice to have a little flexibility when we are working on the plan. So I appreciate you giving me the platform to say a couple words, and I am just happy that the board is taking a stand on this.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Doug and Jen. Joan.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall this is a great document, and it really does recognize the existential nature of the climate crisis. It also points out to the implications that it's already having, and particularly the implications it has for our kind of the communities that are marginalized and generally have tended to are going to have be most affected by the climate crisis. So I think we can kind of get forward in terms of this overall. This is really good by still pointing out a couple of weaknesses, which I actually think possibly can be handled through just some fairly minor tweaks in the document. I think the biggest concern I have with it is the way it's structured. It seems to go right to the climate action plan, which not that it was necessarily true, but it gives the sense that we'll do the climate action plan and then we'll take action, versus this is a situation where we have to kind of essentially build the plane while we're flying, so that it should be structured in a way. Again, I think you can tweak it by moving a few things around that says the county has to go, and this really is a whole of government, whole of community approach. So the big kudos on that, but it's kind of here's kind of the bigger direction that we need to go, and we need to get started, and the climate action plan will kind of catch up over in time, because there's also other plans like master transportation plan that's being updated that this should be about. I do think is mentioned is there should be a specific reference to fossil fuels and a specific reference to both electrification and addressing embodied carbon. And from that perspective too, particularly the waste reduction. There's a brief mention of recycling, but what we really should be talking about, and which is in the zero waste resolution that accompanied the solid waste master plan, is that waste reduction should be a priority. So again, you know, those are and then as brought up too is maybe just another phrase or two on natural resources and green infrastructure.
Mark, thank you, Joan. Mark.
Yeah, I had two things I wanted to mention. And actually the first one kind of goes along with some of the things Joan was saying. I think it was very important that on the beginning of page 2, when they talk about an action plan, they're starting immediately to refer to the fact that there's a whole bunch of plans that have been developed that are part of the story. One of the things that always can become an issue, I think, when we talk about action plans and climate, it can be narrowed very quickly by some folks. And if anything, I think this is a message to say, no, it's broad. There's a lot of topics that are part of a climate action plan. And the fact that they're referring and maybe suggesting incorporating the ideas of a bunch of these other plans, many of which are not fully appreciated by certainly the public, but they're important. And I think that's important for us to highlight as a particularly positive component of the way that this thing is written. The second one I wanted to mention is I think it's important for us to be thinking about, and I maybe even suggest some language for the resolution, is that there's a subtle point at the very first of the action items when they talk about the climate action plan, which will then be turned into programs. That process is extremely important because it takes things from the conceptual and the kind of good thoughts to actually doing something. If you have programs, it means you're going to have people doing work. And that's a big deal. And I think it's important that maybe to emphasize the need for good collaboration on designing those programs, because those will be the real meat of whatever this thing is going to be.
Thank you, Mark. Kevin.
Always takes me a while to find my mute button. I have one question, 3 comments, and 1 nitpicky correction we need to recommend. Let me start with the nitpicky correction because it's easiest. In the second whereas, there's just an extra word which shouldn't be there. It's in the second line, it says, in all as aspects. The as is superfluous and should be deleted. Okay. So we can help them clean up their resolution with that. Okay, then the more important comments or question is, do I understand correctly that this document is a product of Takis or Susan, and this is not something which was being issued at our request or at the request of other groups? This is
Yes, Takis
okay.
has been talking about doing this for months, and then he must have roped Susan into, I'm sure, not just into supporting it, but in helping to write it.
Okay. Well, and
But
in
I'd say
light of
our
that,
advocacy over years has contributed to, you know, kind of the desire to move forward more aggressively. So let's pat
sure,
ourselves
no, I
on the
understand.
back.
We've been pressing for aggressive movement forever. But this particular document, if it's Takis product, I agree very much with Doug's comments that we should not be, you know, working it over to death. Having said that, I want to point out a couple things that if there's any way that we can raise them in what will be viewed as a friendly way, as opposed to a nitpicky or a criticism way, I would hope we would do it. One is, when I just read through it, it read like a lot of words and only 2 sections that actually does anything concrete. And the words are great. Now, Mark, you were pointing to some language about turning policies into programs. Like maybe I glossed over that. That is really critical. If a lot of the words that are in this resolution are actually going to be interpreted as direction to institute programs, I think that's very helpful. I just didn't really see anything operative other than number 3 and number 4 in the resolution, and the rest could just be essentially whittled down to almost nothing if you don't have good follow-up on programs. So that was a little bit of my concern, is something more concrete would be more helpful. And then related to that, and this is my last comment, we're at an opportunity right now, the Arlington County Board is, Arlington County is an opportunity right now to make this resolution something reflective of the change in reality that just occurred last week. And that is, we no longer have a federal government that's actively going to make any progress on these issues, and in fact is going to be throwing roadblocks into progress on these issues. And what does Arlington County do about it? And obviously this is something that Arlington County would be doing about it, but it would be nice in the resolution, I think, to actually reflect that reality in some way, that we can at the local level make some efforts to do our little bit to make up for the change that is occurring at the national level. And maybe it's just too defeatist, we don't want to go there, but I'm just wondering if Arlington County is missing an opportunity with this resolution to actually say, we don't give a damn what the federal government is doing. We're still concerned about climate change, and we're going to do something about it in Arlington.
Yeah, I think it depends on how we go about saying that, but it's certainly a sentiment that I agree with. So
I guess on that, Cindy, I'd be reluctant. That's what I'm saying. I'm reluctant to put that in writing. It's going to come across as criticism, right. But maybe a conversation, if we could have that, would be useful.
Yeah, I agree with you on the double-edged sword point. So I appreciate all those comments, but again, Michaela points out correctly that this is our meeting. I don't know that the county board will really consider this in February, but they say that that is the plan. And it's going to be, released to the public tomorrow. So if we are going to have, we do not have another meeting between now and the February county board meeting. So we could, so we have a couple of options. One is, I think what forestry was suggesting is just individual commissioners write notes, write comments, do what you feel you can in your own name. 2 would be to agree right now on a couple of principles and then delegate to a group, to write a letter that we could send around in email, but that we wouldn't be voting on as a full commission, and nonetheless, send it saying the commission agreed in principle to these at its meeting, and sort of try to distinguish between agreeing to the, approving the letter and approving the principles in the letter. And I don't know if there are third options, but those are a couple of ways we could go, and I'd like to hear what people feel comfortable with. And Mark, I don't know if you have your hand up for that, or.
I think Mark had a leftover hand.
Yeah. So I don't know if anyone has thoughts about how we would like to proceed. Doug.
Sure, I've always got thoughts, and chance to share them is wonderful. Thank you, Cindy. So I strongly support your first option. I don't think it's a matter of great suspense in the Arlington community as to whether the Climate Change Commission is going to support a resolution by the county board that climate change is a problem and needs to be addressed. I think that's pretty much a given, and nobody's going to be surprised, or shocked. It's like, what? They didn't come up with a letter in no time at all? I think we're fine just doing individual stuff. And if we try to write a letter, we've got 20 different or 15 different people with 15 different views about what should be in that letter and how it should be written. And it's just a lot more trouble than it's worth. So I think just individual communications, we're really glad the county is doing this big picture. And not getting into the weeds on this. I just don't think it's productive to get into the weeds. It might be construed as criticism, and we certainly don't want to be construed as criticizing what is one of the best things I think the board is going to do for all of 2025 on climate.
But thank you, Doug. And going back to what Elizabeth was saying, you know, we'll have another chance, presumably whether through Jennifer or through the climate action plan, we'll have a chance to weigh in on the action plans, on the conversions from policy to program, all of those things. So those are definitely arguments in favor of what you said. Any other thoughts, comments? Anyone want to speak in favor of the other option? Rob.
Yeah, I'm just curious. There are I've heard the comments that their actions on the be it resolved part here are not too concrete. I'm just curious if the county staff feel that the actions in here that the county will endeavor to, some may fall to the board, some will fall to our team of the policy office to implement these, and if any of the recommendations in here give them pause to implement, or if they would like to see some wording changes. Just for example, coming up with some new programs, it seems like before you do that, you might want to do the gap analysis to see if any other plans that were pointed out on the top of the page already cover some of the things that we want to do, and maybe we just improve those instead of generating new programs. We just modify some of the existing ones that are covered in some of the other plans. So anyway, I just want to give the county staff a chance to see if they have any comments on this. Thanks. Over.
Jennifer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Rob. So are there things that that we'd like to change? Sure. I mean, there's always opportunities for refinement. I want to acknowledge and uplift sort of the need to reference green infrastructure or biophilia. I happen to help the board draft the biophilic resolution. I'm very close to that one. But I also am sensitive to knowing that there are many important resolutions that the board has passed, and yes, they've identified the equity resolution as an important component. But I think that that's worth, to Joan's point, I think that with some minor edits, I think we can incorporate some of those key words in here. And I think what this does is just signal. What I'd like to do is the board's going to pass this in whatever form is going to pass it. And I want to have it in my hand when I go to talk to departments and say, see, it's important. You need to focus. Really, I mean, at the end of the day, and yes, we're all moving in that direction, but it's a powerful tool for the Climate Policy Office, for OSM to use as we're moving forward in our efforts, right? The carbon roadmap, they're doing incredible work. Joan, I hear you on, we can't just wait for the next plan to come out. We cannot let the grass grow under our feet. And so the air is doing this incredible job with the carbon roadmap. We need to push forward and lean into that as we work to update and create this larger scope climate action plan. And so I think, did I answer? And then the one other point, Rob, that you made about the gaps analysis, in my mind, that's something that we will have to do, right? Sort of that's 101 for the comprehensive plan. We'll conduct a gaps analysis, look at what's out there. And we don't want to reinvent wheels. We want to uplift the important essential policies in a climate action plan and maybe tweak them, right? And ideally, we're going to have some sort of model where we can optimize those recommendations to give us the best bang for our buck.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I hear you saying that it might be helpful in signaling if some of these words were included, but I also recognize that, you know, we have representatives from Eco Action here, from Sierra Club here on our call. So there will be people making points, and people can make individual points. So, so I'm hearing all of these things. Is there anybody who would like to speak in favor of us writing a formal letter, as opposed to, I will probably write informal comments? And I will say in my comments that we discussed this at the C2E2. I'll let Susan know really informally that we discussed this resolution tonight and people were really excited about it, pleased with it, happy, you know, that she'll be getting comments from various people about tweaks, but that we're very overwhelmingly supportive. Does everybody feel like that is accurate about where we are?
Yeah, I think that's the tenor of it, is that, you know, overall, we're thrilled that this is being done and we strongly support it. But we would, you know, given our brothers, we'd like to see a couple of tweaks that would just make it a little bit stronger.
Yeah.
And I'm the negative one here, but even me, I agree with that and think we should do that.
You are not the negative one here. There's tons of competition for that title, Kevin. Anyway.
Cindy, I think this is Rob. I think if I'm comfortable letting you write like a very short, I think it's more powerful rather than us individually. I mean, we all could write those too, but it'd be nice to have a letter from C2E2 that supports us. I'm not sure if that's what you're recommending or if you're just recommending you as chair, because we could just say in principle agree that we want you to write something like a 2-sentence supportive thing and then approve that, and then you could write something on behalf of C2E2. I'd be comfortable with that, but I'm not sure if everyone else is.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it just kind of, you know, coming from you saying that, you know, this was not an approved letter. However, we had a lengthy discussion and it generally reflects the sentiments that we discussed.
Right. I think you should do that.
It's kind of tricky in terms of the open meeting rules of how you approve a letter. So it's not would be formally treated as a letter from C2E2.
Right.
Okay. Well, so I can do that, and I'm feeling like I have the gist. I'm not then attaching a marked up version, or, you know, I may throw in, we would like to see, you know, like a sentence that says we would like to see references to fossil fuels, electrification, you know, but I'm not going to rewrite it because we're just not doing that right now. But I know that other groups will be writing more detailed letters, other groups that aren't as constrained as we are about the open public meeting rules. Okay, so was there anybody, so the current approach on the table is commissioners are welcome to write their own comments. I will write a short letter in my personal capacity, but noting that I'm chair of C2E2, noting that we conversed it, noting that we're very supportive. And here's a few things we would like to see you consider, but we're just really happy that you're doing this and thank you so much. So that's the plan on the.
Is if this gets on the agenda for February county board meeting, I'd encourage everybody to come out for it. I mean, and some people speak for it. I mean, just taking a minute or two, but just having a room filled with people that are supporting this resolution will give it more oomph, because it's clearly something that's caught the attention of the public.
Joan, will you send, as we get closer to the agenda, will you send out or remind us to send out, there's a note with like the agenda, the timing, and what your best guess is, so that people will have a better, because those county board meetings can be an all day thing. Okay,
and
so
some of the other community groups are looking at how they're going to kind of handle the meeting too, but kind of the same.
Right. Okay, so is there anybody who, all right, I'm gonna, is everybody comfortable with that? Can I see a show of hands that that's our plan? Okay, is there anybody who isn't comfortable with that? Okay, oh, Michaela, sorry, I can't see everybody.
I was showing my hand. I'm fine.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, so then I think we have a few minutes to talk about the SPRC checklist. Jenna, if you can pull up the draft that I sent you earlier. That's the Melwood one, which I also did send you. But so this one, so I was looking at the SPRC, you know, we've been talking at our last few meetings about the SPRC checklist. We've been talking about tweaking it to more accurately reflect what we know now, recognizing that we're standing on the shoulders of giants, but that we need to update it a little bit just for our projects for this year, that we're not doing a massive rewrite now. That is going to be somewhat tied to the Green Building Incentive Program. But recognizing that a lot of projects are not using the GBIP right now, it made a lot of sense to tie our original framework to the GBIP, because that's how we were able to get information. People would participate in that, they'd have to provide all the information for it. Now they're not doing that as much. It is still hard to get the information. But I've marked this. So that was question one, is cutting the ties with GBIP. And the second question is, are we really trying to do something different here? Something different from what the county is doing? You know, GBIP is going to have its own, you know, we're trying to hold projects to a higher standard, the standard that it would take to get, if the county really is going to meet its goals that we were talking about for carbon neutrality and, you know, all the goals that they have. So I think I sent an email suggesting that we are not tied to the green bill, that my recommendation is we don't tie ourselves to that. And so just leaving that there for, you know, in the parking lot for a second to come back to discuss. I just looked at our existing checklist and what we would change to do some of the updates we've talked about, and I highlight them. So waste diversion is one thing that we don't currently have, that there's been, and I know Joan sent an email around recommending this. So I've put in a possible placeholder, 60% construction waste diversion to meets, 75 to exceed. That's not something that's in our current checklist at all, but that waste diversion is becoming more and more important. Building materials, the reason I highlighted that, these are both things in the category of green building certification and carbon reduction. I highlighted the building materials because they both are tied to LEED 4.1. And we've said that given that LEED is transitioning to 5.0, we want to transition to whatever they have in 5.0. I would love to get some help on figuring out what we should say, but I highlighted that. Again, the next category 2, which is energy optimization, is tied to LEED 4.1. So those categories, people who know LEED who could help update those categories would be awesome. This next thing I highlighted in green because I don't think we should replace it. It's the one that says if you write a narrative about your energy, that's awesome. If you write a narrative, that's awesome. And if you post it publicly, you exceed. I just think that's just not strong enough. So, I mean, your narrative can say we're not going to do anything on energy efficiency, and you can post it publicly and then you exceed. I just don't think that's stringent enough. So I highlighted that. The next one, again, it's tied to GBI. So we would want to replace the GBI. This is the Energy Star certification and energy benchmarking. We could use the wording from GBI. We don't have to change the standard, but just not tie it to GBI. The next piece, buildings electrical capacity, again, tied to GBI. We'd want to update that. So scrolling down. Then we got down to biophilia. Again, that was one that our current standards just say if you provide a narrative. I thought we should strengthen that. So I split the exceeds. I moved the easier part of exceeds over to meets and kept the rest of exceeds there. Stormwater management, again, we've talked before about, it just says you have to meet Virginia Building Code, which of course you have to do anyway. So again, I did the same thing. I moved some of this stuff from exceeds over to meets and left the rest over at exceeds. So these are the kinds of changes. And then once we had our total categories, we could change the weights. As Mark has pointed out, our weights really make it, or the weighting doesn't necessarily drive behavior the way we would like it to. I added a placeholder for urban heat island reduction. We've been talking about that. And then this DEI category, we talked about that what we have is not hard hitting enough, not stringent enough, but I don't know. You know, I know, Jonathan, you mentioned that there's a new world out there in terms of DEI and ways to measure and information we can get. I don't know what it is though. But so these are the kinds of changes that I'm thinking we should make and to our form and use this year. So these are just updates of what we have, such as moving from LEED 4.1 to LEED 5.0. This is not a massive rewrite, but it does incorporate some of what we've discussed. So I'll stop there and see if I have any comments or anybody who would like to work on this. I know you haven't seen this before. Doug.
Yeah, okay, I'll step into the rattlesnake pit here. I'm having a real hard, I'm a contrarian. So, look, I'm with the greatest respect to those who are diverse in our community and appreciation for diversity and equity and inclusion in our community. I just have a real hard time seeing how climate change, energy, and environment has a whole lot to do with DEI. And I think it would be more intellectually coherent if our scores on buildings did not include a foray into the minefield of DEI. I think we should stick with climate change, energy, and environment, and just leave the DEI stuff off of here. There's plenty of other advocates for DEI in Arlington County.
So I see Mark next, but Jonathan, are you going to respond to that?
Yeah. So
And thank you, Doug. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm just saying, thanking Doug for stepping into the snake pit. Now, Jonathan, welcome to the snake pit.
Thanks. I love snake pits. I've always aspired to be Indiana Jones. So I think maybe that's inappropriately termed, and energy equity or energy justice is a more appropriate term because, right, I mean, yes, if you just take the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion writ large, there are, of course, a lot of people who have a hell of a lot more expertise in that writ large. But if we're talking about the energy component of that, if we leave that to those who have expertise in that subject, it's just chances are they don't have the expertise to understand the ways in which energy equity can be executed and energy justice can be executed, and the importance of so if a building is going to be built, and what are the implications of that for lower income residents, or I mean, I think there's just a lot of ways that if we ignore the concept entirely, then we are ignoring an imperative, which is that climate change amelioration efforts are not going to work if they only really support those that right, like the upper 60% of income individuals.
Thank you, Jonathan. Joan and Melissa, are either of you going to continue on this topic?
Yeah, I was going to kind of follow up on that is I think maybe rethinking that is, when the GBIP in which we kind of followed, they looked at it in terms of the hiring and who's actually working to build the building. And maybe a way of, it's almost bonus points or looking at it in terms of how it advances community goals for affordable housing. And certainly one thing that's always an issue that comes up is whether they pay into a affordable housing fund versus providing on-site, and then they get into whether there's how many 2 bedrooms and even 3 bedrooms that are being provided, and whether or not, kind of, and that might be something, because I think that it ultimately gets down is if we're really talking about equity and inclusion, it means that we're, when we're developing, especially multifamily buildings, which is almost everything we see these days, is, they need to be ones that are meeting our, goal of actually being an inclusive community, which means that we have housing. Because otherwise you can run into issues where, they tear something down that was affordable and doesn't, and build something that people can't afford.
Melissa, are you also on this topic? Or, because thanks, Mark, for your patience.
Yeah, I just wanted to plus one that I think, energy equity is important, and I'm happy to help do some or write in some suggested edits for how I think we could make it more accurate.
That would be great. And right now it's very heavily weighted also because it's a loan. It's the only thing in its category. So it's super important. I mean, we wanted to recognize that it's super important, but it has to be, to have that kind of weight, it either has to be super meaningful or we have to cut back on the weight. All right. Well, thank you all. And with that, Mark, thank you. I'm going back to you.
Yeah, I actually had one thought related to the DEI issue here too. I
Okay.
found it useful a while ago to take a look at how LEAD was addressing social equity. And it was interesting that they divided it into 3 general categories. One was essentially what we have in our standard, which is related to the contractors and their labor policies. Another one was the supply chain. And the third one was the community. And I think some of the things that folks are suggesting here might be in that latter category where you're saying in the areas of energy and environment, we are trying to make sure there's good access to the benefits of those things in poorer communities in Arlington and find ways of incorporating that concept into what we're really asking people to do. And so it would be a community-based benefit you'd be looking to.
And that's sort of what we did with Melwood. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, well, I think that's where because if I understand the history, and this happened before my time, but I thought this is one of these things where we were kind of in a position where we needed to do something on social equity because of the boards speaking to that at some point generically. And it by redefining it a bit, I think you can get it more relevant to the well-made point that this is not necessarily about DEI per se. This is about climate and energy and environment.
Right.
But I think we can probably find a way of getting to that linkage.
Thank you for all that. Thank you for that comment from all of you on this point. And it sounds like, Doug, we can weave back to where you started us. So thank you. Rob, I'm going to let you have the last word on this.
Actually, I did want to.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Are people willing to work on this? Maybe that was Doug. Maybe he was trying to stick everybody with doing something. I don't know. I am interested in the heat issue. I'm interested in the stormwater. I have been working on a version of stormwater that would not be tied to following the law. It would be something more than that. And it would be focused very much on the issue of making sure we're getting people having enough capacity to make a difference. Sometimes people are saying, well, I have detention and retention of stormwater, but when you find out how big these units are, they're little planters, 2 by 2 by 2, and it's really not much. So, but I'll help on that.
Okay, thank you. So, and I hear Mark, Melissa, and Rob, I think you've said the same thing in the past too. But Rob, over to you.
Yeah, no, just to offer, I'm happy to work on this too. And I think I mentioned this in one of the previous meetings that maybe that column that's GBI or C2E2 baseline, that we need to clarify that as well. I mean, since the county is making the GBI determination, that maybe, we just, whether we're establishing our own baseline or using some other external lead or other category, we make our own baseline and not confuse matters with whether or not it's in the green building incentive policy. But in any case, yes, happy to work on this with you and anyone else.
Great.
Thanks. Over.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that discussion. Really appreciate it.
Would add to is as we do this, I would help to have kind of a narrative description that can actually be built into our letters. I think we kind of started with that, and then as letters got written, because projects are different, they get tailored and changed, but something that would kind of explain why it is we're looking at these categories and in what and how it relates, and maybe, you know, kind of teasing out the, you know, different categories that we're looking at, kind of the energy versus the biophilic stormwater, and some other elements. And maybe that's the way we can actually handle some of the equity issues too, is how actually building to the standards that we see as the kind of ideal, or what building should be in the best of all possible worlds, is actually going to be more equitable, because it's going to save energy. But that we also want to make sure that, you know, the community benefits include provisions that will make sure to keep Arlington inclusive by having, you know, housing available at different income levels.
Okay, so thank you all. I will follow up with people who volunteered on that. While we still have a quorum, I want to go to item 7 on the agenda, which is the approval of the December meeting summary. I didn't check today. I know there have been comments in it. Jenna, are there any new comments in it, or any substantive comments that we should discuss?
I think I added a sentence or correction on the discussion on the master transportation plan update.
Okay. Jenna, are you comfortable with all the changes? I am.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
Yep.
they looked good. Elizabeth, I don't know if you saw my email. Just wanted to make sure I cover that in the future.
Yeah, I had just mentioned to Jenna, I just noted that sometimes the meeting summaries call out specific individuals' comments, and this one seemed to more discuss the tenor of the overall conversation. I'm not sure if it's an important distinction, but I didn't have any specific things to call out,
yeah,
Jenna, from the last time.
My general preference from the lawyer perspective is to be less specific about individual names and more about a commissioner said and the commission agreed, or the main topics of discussion were. But I didn't change that. This is just, I didn't direct that, but I do like that approach. Our meetings are public, and and they're recorded, and if people want to see who said what, they can. But I think in general, it isn't about who said what, it's about what was said. But anyway, we can talk about that. But for right now, would anyone like to make a motion to accept the summary as with the edits people have put in?
I move that we approve with the edits.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Yep. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And the other thing I want to do before we go to Joan on the master transportation plan is elect Jamie Kern to the Energy Committee. Many of you have met Jamie. He's come to a number of our meetings. He has an incredible energy background. I sent out his resume. Elizabeth has interviewed him. I've interviewed him. Michaela's interviewed him. So I would look for a motion to elect Jamie Kern to the Energy Committee. Elizabeth. Yeah. And I saw Rob second. Any discussion? Michaela. Oh, sorry, you were just raising your hand.
Correct.
To vote. Yeah. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. So we have time left. We have Joan on the master transportation plan. And I know Doug wasn't able to present at our December meeting, so he has some time to talk about the Energy Committee, and then Elizabeth. So with that in mind, Joan, over to you for the master transportation plan, and thanks to people who put in comments on that plan.
Yeah, kind of really appreciate the comments. We will be meeting tomorrow to discuss this, and I think this is, are you seeing my?
Yes.
Am I sharing? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So appreciate the comments. Again, I probably took this a little bit beyond what the instructions were, but I do think some of these points are important. I did add a little bit more context on the mobility versus transportation. Essentially, we're talking about moving people rather than vehicles and related infrastructure, which, again, it's a nuanced change, but I think it makes a difference. Climate crisis is clearly, we just had full discussion on the climate resolution, so this weighs in. So I think with the goals itself, people seem to be comfortable. Yeah, I kind of like efficient, I think probably works. It's making the best use of our resources, whether it's the the investment in the vehicles, or actually the real estate that's involved in our transportation infrastructure. I was just trying to look for something clever and that, but I think, again, it's hard to kind of capture that general idea of how we think about this. Is, again, I put in, it's not a one size fits all, but we're really kind of looking to maximum, again, but efficient probably is the closest term for that. So, and again, we weren't asked to give metrics and targets, but I do think it's important that they come forward with that when they go to the county board later this year. So does anybody have any questions?
Kevin and then Elizabeth, are you guys? Yeah, Kevin.
I had a comment more than a question, or maybe not a comment, a suggestion for a change. Is that now or later?
Yeah, that's now.
Okay. The only thing I would suggest, and y'all know how much I like EV charging. On the zero emissions, I would not say that primarily means EV charging infrastructure. I think that actually means things like sidewalks and bike lanes. There's lots of infrastructure things that are necessary to get that will achieve zero emissions that other than EV charging. So if you're talking about a master transportation plan, not just something energy focused, I would definitely broaden that.
Yeah, well, I think some of that is incorporated in this whole master plan.
Again, I'm just worried about, John, I'm just worried about that bullet saying that's primarily a question. I know the Transportation Commission would say right off the bat, no, the best thing you do is get people out of cars, get them on bicycles or walking. And they're probably right.
Yeah, and that's again, all these goals, but there's still the vehicles that are on the road, including the transit buses, should all be electric vehicles. So I think most of that's actually reflected in most of the other, in the overarching.
Right. Is the goals document here just your summary, or is that going to be a release
Well, there's going to be a vision, and hopefully the vision, and again, that we haven't seen the vision that should actually weigh in terms of it really is about getting people out of their cars.
Okay.
And using other forms of transportation so that they don't have to.
Okay. Again, the only thing I'm trying to do is not throw a bullet out right away that'll get shot down by the stop driving folks, which I think they will do. So
I can change the order and put that more towards the end.
Or maybe just say, if you're talking about zero emission vehicles, that means EV charging infrastructure, which it does. So
yeah. I mean, ultimately, we want to have, when they talk about our greenhouse gas inventory, transportation to zero.
Yep.
And we probably don't get that just by turning everything into electric.
Yep.
So
sorry, John.
I said, what's the, is it changing the order or adding additional
I feel better adding additional, but I would just say, or not just say primarily, say including EV infrastructure. I just, EV charging is not the best solution for zero emissions. According to a lot of transportation folks, and they're right.
Elizabeth.
Thank you. Similar comment under metrics, just kind of pointing out that we can keep adding EV charging stations to a point where there's severely diminishing returns. And I think it's an easy thing to measure, but at some point it doesn't really matter how many charging stations we have. It matters, are people making different mobility choices? Are they, swapping out their internal combustion vehicles for electric vehicles? Like, what's the uptake? Are there fewer internal combustion engines on the road is, in my view, a better metric than the number of charging stations that are in Arlington. Even though it's harder to measure, but it matters a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a
I
lot
mean,
of
again,
sense.
I think all of these things would tend to fit together. So, I mean, right now, we could probably say that there isn't sufficient charging infrastructure, certainly not to support fully.
We're not there
electrified.
today, but
Yeah.
I don't know how long the master transportation plan is, a 5-year plan. I would imagine by the end of 5 years, and who knows, right, what's going to happen to policy support for EV charging over the next 4 years. But I imagine that, 5 years from now, we're looking at a very different
It may not be a
environment
metric
for
that
EVs.
means anything.
Other comments? Sorry, Joan.
Yeah, and I think some of these also probably don't necessarily need targets. I certainly wouldn't put a target on car ownership, just because, again, it's being a bit judgmental, and that's just an indicator of success if people are saying, oh, well, I really don't need the second car, or maybe I don't even need a car at all. And you're right, that ultimately gets down to saying how successful you are, is looking at those types of indicators.
Other comments on, as I said in my email, I think this is an excellent draft and it's only getting better. And it's very timely since the Transportation Futures Group is meeting tomorrow. So thank you, Joan, for the time you're spending on that and being our rep. Anything else we should discuss? Okay, well, thank you. So then I think we're at the update section, and happily many of the things like the climate change resolution. I was going to just mention when I did this agenda, hey, there's some talk of a climate change resolution, but we've done that now. It came out. And I think we've touched on a lot of other things. So Doug, over to you for what you didn't get to catch us up on.
Yeah, so as far as the Energy Committee, I'll just update on the December meeting, and Elizabeth can update on the January meeting of the Energy Committee. As far as the December meeting, there are 3 issues, and I'll just be real quick. First had to do with the solar real estate tax exemption. I had a concern that there was a backlog in working on and resolving the applications. They had like 50 unresolved at one point. And Rich Dooley, thank you, put me in touch with somebody from the assessor's office. I had a long conversation with that individual. He was very helpful. Bottom line, there were like 2 things that happened that led to that significant backlog. They're working down the backlog. I don't think it's a permanent structural issue. I don't think they need to have more staff or anything. So I'm pretty well happy with the way that exemption is being implemented by the county staff. And I think that's going pretty well. That's a real positive development. And I'm not worried about that backlog, which I think has already been worked down significantly. Second issue had to do with the permit fee for in-home residential EV chargers. I had a friend who paid $2,600 to have an EV charger installed when my friend got a new EV. And of that $2,600, $250, or almost 10%, was a county permit fee. And that seemed high to my friend and seemed high to me also. The whole issue of county permits and how much things cost is a very complex issue. And my conclusion now, a couple months later, is it's not something that is worthy today of the time of this committee. I mean, we could recommend lower permit fees, but that's just such a whole complex issue. So I think we should let that go. And the third issue has to do with gas-powered leaf blowers. The Attorney General of Virginia issued an opinion in August that Alexandria could ban them under its noise ordinance. I believe it's the Climate Policy Office rather than OSIM has been charged by the county manager with looking into an ordinance that might ban or substantially cut back on the use of gas-powered leaf blowers in Arlington. Scott Sklar, who just recently resigned from the Energy Committee, many of you may know Scott, provided some information to the Climate Policy Office that might help the Climate Policy Office in its efforts in that regard. And I think we should continue to monitor this issue and continue to encourage the Climate Policy Office to promptly come up with an ordinance for the county board. And I guess the county attorney would have to review also. But we'd really like to see an ordinance banning gas-powered leaf blowers, especially those of us who like to sleep past 7 o'clock on Saturday morning. So that's the third issue, and we'll just continue to monitor and hope on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin, I'm not sure if you still have your hand up.
No, it's new. Just responding to Doug, I know that David Reed from out in Loudoun County in the Virginia legislature has introduced a bill which may go somewhere on this point, maybe reinforcing the ability to actually do local ordinances on gas-powered leaf blowers.
Yeah, I think that's dead at this point.
Is it? Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah,
David was just touting it.
this
in his
year.
email.
They'll resurrect it next year.
Okay.
Jennifer. Oh.
You're on mute still.
Or maybe you took your hand down?
Nope, sorry, I did not unmute. Cindy?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, good. Thank you. So thanks, Doug, for providing the update on the leaf blowers. Wanted to share with the commission that I've been in conversation with my colleagues over in Alexandria, and tomorrow, as part of their version of the manager's report, staff will be making a presentation on leaf blowers and asking for guidance. I hope I'm not misrepresenting it, but I think it's guidance on proposed next steps, which I think what it looks like is maybe doing some listening sessions with the landscape community, residents on possible scenarios for a potential policy. So there's a lot of parts of this that are sort of outstanding, but if I'm not able to watch the board meeting live, my plan is to watch the tape, and I'll be able to report back on what I hear. But Alexandria, and we did talk at length about their perspective on leaf blowers and sort of where they're trying to sort of move towards. So it's early days. They only own one electric powered leaf blower in their inventory. Arlington County is basically 100% electric leaf blowers, and also other handheld landscape devices, or equipment. So they've got some learning that they need to do as well. So I get that.
Great, thank you. Hearing nothing more, Elizabeth, over to you for any January Energy Committee updates.
Well, thank you. We had a great organizational meeting for the start to the year. We went over the EC charter, including some interesting aspects, one of which is, in addition to being a committee that advises and informs C2E2, the EC charter allows for the committee to make recommendations directly to county staff in the county manager's office and AIR and OSEM and DES, which seems mighty. And so we talked a little bit about what a recommendation would actually look like and the process that we would use to make a recommendation. And as some of the issues that Doug raised, we kind of started to explore, is there a recommendation somewhere in those? And so we're kind of learning how much due diligence we might want to do before we make a formal recommendation, how that might look. We also talked about ways that the committee could help the commission with respect to the SPRC process. I took a couple comments that I thought about sharing when we were discussing that, but just to kind of summarize, there were comments about whether we could have meaningful input at the specific time period where we're being asked to weigh in, and perhaps we could be more impactful earlier in the process, to perhaps focus on things that we absolutely have to have, as opposed to everything within the scope, and to look for things that are potentially costless to developers, or to be aware that we're asking developers to do things that that are costly to them. And so that's going to be an ongoing discussion, because we do have a number of folks on the EC that have some expertise that could be helpful to the commission. Finally, we talked about the timeline for the climate action plan. Rich shared that the county is, and Jen, feel free to chime in with clarifications here. The current plan would be to wait for the greenhouse gas inventory results and then use that information to inform an RFP, to screen for conflict of interest, select a firm to actually carry that out, and then the consultant that's hired would recommend the scope and timing of outreach. One thing that the committee may end up recommending is to accelerate the release of an RFP rather than to wait for the outcome of the inventory results, so that that can be sped up a little bit, since we're already looking at, at least 18-month process. So would welcome any refinements on that from Jen, but I'll stop there since Doug already gave an update on a lot of the issues that we're monitoring.
Jen?
Okay, thank you. So I think Elizabeth got that's the general plan. We do have an on-call contract. It's a master agreement where we have access to different consultants that can help us. And so it's not without it. I think when we're looking at the big timeline, we're looking at worst case scenario and trying to think through all the steps that we may have to take if the on-call contract is not something that we're able, willing, maybe there's conflicts of interest. I mean, I don't know, right? So I very much hear you. We want to move forward as quickly and thoughtfully as we can. So I would just say that we're that's very much top of mind about how we can get there a little faster. But I would also say that it's useful to have the greenhouse gas emissions inventory regardless, so that we can appropriately scope the plan. So I think we can do both. Yes.
Jen, I would love for you to join us at the next EC meeting to kind of go over that in a little more detail. And since the board's climate resolution didn't necessarily go into as much detail as the commission's letter on the subject, we may think about doing a recommendation for scope or et cetera. But I think we'll want to be cooperative and collaborative with county staff on the best way for the commission or rather the committee to weigh in on the process, but we're going to be tracking it pretty closely this year. That's it for me.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Jen. Joan?
It's just going to kind of follow up with the questions. Number one, it sounds like the greenhouse gas inventory is already done. It's just waiting to go through the internal hoops, so that shouldn't, at this point, it's been a delaying factor for a while. The other thing is, are you looking at ways to actually streamline the planning process to get right down? I mean, there's a lot of good climate action plans that even many of our local jurisdictions have, is kind of, starting with, as part of the RFP, is setting out some of the high level guidelines and targets and that. And then, so we can get much quicker down to particular strategies and action items. Because, again, hopefully, obviously, I don't think the county's stopping and waiting for this plan to be done, but it's kind of, the quicker it can be done, the better we're going to have. We can move even more quickly on addressing the climate crisis. And again, this is not new. We're not plowing any new ground. So let's take advantage of what's out there so that we can kind of streamline the process.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. So yes, I'd love to streamline it. We've already done a fair amount of benchmarking, knowing that this time might come, and wanted to, I always say luck favors the prepared. I also say I don't like reinventing the wheel, just improving on the wheel. So if some other jurisdiction has done a good job, we can customize it and make it better for Arlington, great. And so hopefully we will be as efficient as possible. But again, Arlington, we want to make sure that it works for us and it meets our needs. And so based on the way that the resolution was written, although I welcome the thoughts and comments around the scope, hopefully we can use a model to help us optimize the recommendations based on cost and co-benefits, etc., like all these sorts of things stacked up together, so that we have a clear picture of where we're going to get the best bang for our buck, like I mentioned earlier, and then again, further propel our efforts. Not saying that we're already doing incredible work, and this will just help us to get there even faster, potentially.
All right, well, we are at time, or a couple of minutes over. Thank you for all of that. The last thing on our agenda is an update on the Vision 2050. You may remember we wrote a 3-page letter on our vision for Arlington in roughly 25 years. And the county board has released its Vision 2050 report, which Joan could say more about, but given the limits of time, I'm just going to encourage you to read it, but there's a lot of focus on our issues, a lot of focuses on climate, on environment, on natural resources. And apparently a lot of people in the community wrote in about those things too, because those are all so important to our quality of life here. So it's great to see that well represented in the final Vision 2050 report. So thank you all for all your feedback on that last summer when we sent it in. And with that, is there any final comments? Otherwise, we will adjourn. All right. Thank you all very, very much. Every time I open my mouth, I have this message that says no one can hear you. So I really hope that's not true. I have it right now, but
I can hear you.
We can hear you. Thanks for keeping us on track.
Yes. So anyway,
Thank you, Cindy.
all. And lots to follow up on, so I'll be in touch with many of you. So appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Yep, good night.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Good night.